This is Eric Rutan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew McKay Smith.
G'day everybody, thanks so much for tuning in, I really appreciate it. I've got a conversation with the one and only Blitz from Overkill to share with you. Now the catalyst for the conversation with Blitz is due to the launch of a new album from Overkill. This one is titled Scorched. Throughout this conversation, of course, we talk about the album, namely the guitar soloing and the guitar playing, the return of Colin Richardson for production duties, lyrical themes. Yeah, we dive deep into the lyrical themes and actually expand into the world of social and current affairs too. So that's a very interesting aspect of this conversation. Yeah, this is a conversation that it might even be reprised. We might even have a part 2 to offer sometime in the near future. I am going to play a tune for you. If you are listening via the podcast apps, this one is called Wicked Place. Once it's done, we'll dive into the chat. You people on YouTube, let's get to it now. Either way, let's go.
Bring you to this Hey, bro. How are you, Andy?
G'day, mate. It's been a while. It's been a few years. I don't know whether you remember. We had about 2 or 3 chats in 2017, I think it was now, going back that far.
Skype chats, right?
Spot on. You remember. Yeah.
I guess I was a grinding wheel then.
Yeah, Grinding Wheel,
Yeah,
and there was an
probably
Australian
Grinding
tour. Yeah, and an Australian tour as well. There were 2 of them, yeah.
That's right. That was right. That was the second Australian tour we ever did. That was good fun.
It was, yeah. It was one of those things where my kids are a bit older now, so I can actually get out and go to gigs, but it was one of those gigs that I had to forfeit due to the fact that, young infants and that sort of thing, it was just too hard to sort of get out. And yeah, you're probably my favourite band, the favourite band of mine that I haven't seen yet. So, mate, please tell me an Australian tour is somewhere on the agenda.
Well, you could have given the kids back.
Mate, my wife's half Croatian. She would have beaten me up.
I see you're a bass player. I mean, you're a bass player. You must be even busier with that. I can see it in the background there.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah. I've got I'm not a big gig. I mean, God, nothing compared to what you guys do, but a big gig for us at one of the taverns locally here. But it's one of the higher paying gigs and stuff. But yeah, you're right, mate. It's between working. I work from home, obviously. I'm a journo and I work from home, and then being a parent and householder and husband and stuff, and then playing in the band on the weekends, mate. There's never a bloody dull moment, I can tell you.
You know the joke about the bass player. He walks into a music shop and he's trying to figure out what instrument he wants, and the guy said, "Well, you could try the bass. I mean, you could start off easily with the bass, and I could give you lessons." And he's like, "All right." So he gets a bass and he takes his first lesson. He learns the E string. And the guy says, "I want you to learn the E string. Come back next week." And the guy never shows up. The bass player never shows up. 2 weeks go by. The guy keeps leaving messages, and finally, the bass player calls the instructor back. Like after a month and a half, he goes, "Hey," I said, "Why are you ignoring my messages?" He goes, "Oh man, I learned that fucking E string, and I got gigs all over the fucking place now. I'm so busy."
It's so true. I don't know whether DD ever found this when he was coming up, but I used to go to, this is back in the day when sessions were a real thing, where you actually got called and you went to Melbourne or whatever, and yeah, go to this studio here and there'll be some stuff for you to play. And when I used to play really, like Billy Sheehan, not like that, but, approach it that way, like more notes is better sort of thing. The irony is, mate, was that as soon as I started just playing the fucking E string and the A string, more calls came through. I used to get, yeah, this guy's great.
He's great. He's not a problem. He doesn't bring the other 2 strings into it, so he's not a problem.
Yeah, I did sessions where I listened back to the recording afterwards, and I had to ask, is the bass even on there? Because I can't hear it, like a la Jason Newsted.
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that I've always been blessed with. They'll always say, I can tell Overkill by Bobby's voice. I say, yeah, before I'm singing, there's that fucking clanking bass in there somewhere. Mm-hmm. I say, if you pay attention, you're a bass aficionado. You'll recognize Dee Dee Verney and his clank.
Oh, you two together are hand in glove. I couldn't imagine the band without you guys together. I mean, to your point, your voice and his bass sound, that's the sound of Overkill, in my opinion.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, how many years is it? I mean, why mess with something that's working for us? I remember my niece asking me, what do you really do for a living? She had some project, at school. She had to interview my brother. He's an attorney. Her mother's a really high-end nurse. My father was an attorney. Yeah, there's all sorts of professions. She got to me, and I said, well, I alienate the masses and endear myself to a small minority. That's exactly what I did with this irritating voice.
Well, it certainly works. I've always thought you were like a Bon Scott, from that sort of ilk. Would you agree? Do you get that feedback often?
Here and there. And it's funny because, my first gig as a singer was I thought I was going in as a bass player. I mean, I had, I had a Precision. I have an old Hofner. I have a Fender Mustang short neck. It was a cover band in college, and they were doing AC/DC and some Priest. And, and I thought that's what I was asked to do, but they obviously needed a singer. I showed up, there was already a bass player there, and I cut my teeth on a couple of old Bon, and I think Brian Johnson was singing by then, and Back in Black had been out. So I had done some AC/DC, and it just was, it was kind of in my wheelhouse. But, it's not really, I don't know if you can say my voice is cut from that, or, we're cut from the same cloth, but for sure, I just wasn't afraid to do it. And I think that's really, the bottom line. A lot of guys get behind a mic, or girls who get behind a mic, and it's like, I don't want to do this. For many of them. For me, I didn't give a shit, and I think that not giving a shit really, that's what got me the gig.
That's a really interesting point, because I do singing as well. I do some lead vocals too, and I find that I adopt personas depending on the song. Playing covers, you really got to try to remain as faithful to the song as you can. But even in and amongst that, the vocal archetype I work toward playing covers is Richard Butler from Psychedelic Furs. So that coming from the top down sort of thing. So did you have to do that early on, or were you just always you?
Well, I think I just always was me. I just didn't have anything that was melodic. I was a cigarette smoker. I was a partier. I like yelling. I like loud music. I like punk. My mother sang like an angel. She toured with fucking Mitch Miller. She wasn't like, just some singer. She hung an 8x10 up in the. She had an 8x10 hung up in the Copacabana in New York. But she comes from Irish immigrant parents who had. There was nine sisters. There's no such thing as not a choir when you have 9 Irish sisters, if you know what I'm saying. They're all leaning against the fireplace on a Sunday, harmonizing for the grandparents. Yeah. So all the kids had no problem understanding that singing was just a natural, this was natural. In other houses, maybe it wasn't. But in our house, and probably other houses it was, but I don't think it's the norm that everybody sits around and sings on a Sunday. But in our house, it was, So I think for me, I just it wasn't that I had the balls. It was just kind of, doesn't everybody do this? That kind of a thing.
Yeah, I think if you're Catholic, like you probably likely are, like me, and Irish origin, you grow up singing hymns too. That's the other thing. Yeah. It's inescapable. It's unavoidable. I grew up as a kid in the 80s and through the 90s, and that's just what we did every bloody Sunday. So whether you liked it or not, you were singing.
They throw you up in a choir loft, you know what I'm saying?
I did that too, don't worry.
With the hymn books.
Yeah. And then you lose it. Your voice starts to break at about 13 or 14 or whatever it is, and then you lose it.
That's the thing with me. I never went through puberty, so I can...
Yeah, well, mate, I've got to say, you're in this album here, Scorched. I thought it was your 19th, but apparently it's your 20th. So either way, you're well into it now. Of course you are. As I like to joke, you're damn close to making it a career. You've been on a stellar run of form. Now, realistically, you've been on a stellar run of form since White Devil Armory. As in, the album seemed to be getting better, which is a heck of a thing to be saying this far into a career. Look, I understand that the album too was one of those albums that you either wrote and or recorded through COVID. So was that challenging?
Well, sure. It just kind of changed the game. There's plenty of snow on this roof means that there's plenty of experience here with regard to writing songs, but they were done a certain way, and that was that we would always spend some type of time together. Us with whoever the drummer was, and now Jason for the last couple of records, Ron Lipnicki before that, and so on and so on. We'd be there for the drum tracks and scratching out some scratch guitars and bass, and maybe a vocal track here and there if somebody, if Jason wanted to hear that track. So it was that hands-on old school in the room, let's sweat it. Somebody cracks a couple of beers, somebody brings in some pizza and some spring water, and we have a few laughs, and that's the beginning of the record. So when this was totally remote, it was just that I think we had to do was accept that we had no choice. There was no complaining about it. It wasn't like, oh, this is going to suck. It was just kind of, we're kind of from both schools. We've embraced the technology of file trading. So let's just fucking do it. Let's see what happens. And Jason snuck out of the house, and I guess it was May, and he was done with all the drum tracks by early June of 2020. And those drum tracks never changed, from that point on. So we had this foundation to start fucking with for over 2 years, 2+ years. The guitar, Dave's fucking with his end of it, and Dee Dee's fucking with it, and I'm fucking with it. So all we're doing is working around those drum tracks remotely. And I think to some degree to have the luxury of time, which is one of the things we've never embraced in the past, gave us good results. We just kind of said, fuck it eventually. I wrote the record 3 times. I was writing these depressing lyrics, and even the melody lines were depressing. I was like, oh my God, I sound like some kind of gothic person. Hey, no offense to the Gothic people, but I mean, all you got to do is look at me and you can tell I'm not one of them. You know? But the point is, I think the results were good, based on that luxury of time.
Yeah, well, whether it was a different approach or the fact that you had the time, the album's fucking awesome. And one of the key features that I noticed is there's two things, okay? So you work with Colin Richardson, but I'll get to him in the moment, okay, because that was perfect. Dave and Derek have really taken it to the next level. Do you agree? And do you feel like as though they focus more intently on producing more melodic solos?
I think the two people who benefited the most from this record, myself and Dave Litzk. Dave does, he puts everything through the meat grinder. And I think in shorter time spans, it's not that you miss some things, but you don't see all the options that you may have. And I think that's one of the things he did. And as time passed, I remember listening to it, the record, we both had the record. We'd been out on the road and, we were home by like March 15th of 2020 because Peter Pandemic was flying all around and, making us wear masks and all sorts of other happy horse shit. But, I got home and, by May I was talking to him. I'm like, what do you think? He goes, oh, geez, I don't even know where this fucking shit's going, Didi had a skeletal demo he'd given us. But I think that it gave him time to embrace it and make it better. I mean, he became part of the song. I think that when, you look at the diversity on the record, where you go from the thrash shit of Twist of the Wick right into a blues ride for Wicked Place, you think to yourself, how the fuck can one band do two fucking things? Well, that's somebody like Dave putting it through the meat grinder. Because you can hear those leads going from that blistering shred and melodies in Twist of the Wick and then to Wicked Place where it's this tasteful fucking bluesy thing. And I think that's stamped. I'm not going to say most improved player, but I think for sure the guy that gave the record its wings is what I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I tend to agree. Yeah, that might be the extra dimension that I'm hearing. So I've only listened to it 3 or 4 times. But first of all, I love it when this happens. You have an album on in the background and it draws you in. Doesn't happen often, I've got to be frank these days, because I think at this point I've probably heard everything. But in terms of stylistic approaches and the like, but this album here was one of those ones where it was on in the background. I thought, shit, I'm going to have to go back and rewind that song and listen to it again a little bit louder. And that's what I'm talking about, where it's the songwriting and the way you're approaching things seems to be improving from the perspective that the end result is this very fucking compelling album.
So, I guess there's something, it was a dirty word, a decade ago, before we were in our 50s, not in our 60s. and that's maturity. There's something to be said for knowing what to do in that spot. And, you add the extra time to that. And I think that's where it worked. If Dave, Didi has a skeletal demo and he's, I'm bouncing shit off him. Dave's bouncing shit off me. I'm bouncing shit off Dave. It's going all like circular, and it's kind of a whirlwind of ideas. And you just run every option that you fucking have, and that's why I tore this record down, besides being depressed. I'm like, God, look at all these other things that are being exposed to by, Dave and his, his meter of heavy. He's like our heavy guy. So it's like, you want it heavy, you go to Dave. You want it fucking melodic, you go to Didi or you go to me. But hey, listen, for some reason it fucking works. So, why question it or say, will you do it again? I'm like, I'll do anything again. I mean, I love the fucking opportunity to be able to still be doing records and still have them viable 38 years into almost a career,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mentioned something else through that exchange there with Colin Richardson. I mean, I feel like as though he's your guy now, and that's only after hearing it 3 or 4 times, but he's given you guys a sonic sheen that I haven't quite heard before, to be honest. So do you feel the same way about working with Cole, as that it was a match made in heaven? And do you think you'll work with him even on the next album?
Huge amount of comfortability with Colin. I mean, he's been part of the team now for 4 times, Underground and Below, Bloodletting, Killbox, Soup to Nuts, and that was like, he was there from the first note in New Jersey, living on the beach. And he would come up to Didi's studio and we'd all convene there and have lunch and sandwiches and shoot the shit and talk about where we're going. but there's a great trust in that kind of production. I think that Killbox was one of the heaviest pieces of real estate we ever did. It just happened to be in a time when this particular type of music was, its popularity was waning. It was 2003 or four, I guess four, and so I think the point is that it was never that he wasn't the right guy for the job. It was that we'd gone through so many other things looking for something, and we said, we actually already had it with fucking Colin, and we've progressed or matured. I'm sure Colin has, and he added a guy named Chris Clancy, who, it's kind of a duality of team kind of a thing. If it's Dee Dee and I, if the song starts with Dee Dee and ends with me, that's a duality of how that song comes to fruition. I think Colin and Chris are the same. Taking that a step further, we brought it to be mastered to Mayor Applebaum in Los Angeles. Now, listen, this isn't an organic record, but for fuck's sake, I mean, there is something very reminiscent of a guitar tone that is screaming 1990s in there, and a drum resonance that is matching that guitar tone from kind of that same era. Now, sure, there's a digital modern punch to that, but it's like being in two places simultaneously. And I think that was achieved by Colin. And when I started hearing it, I mean, the only input we gave was, don't make it so fucking compressed and loud that people can't listen to the whole thing loud. If you listen to a loud record all compressed or too compressed, it's like it wears your ears out. But this was something that was just, it was just a thing of beauty by the time it was done, and not with 2 tons of input from us, just kind of like a lot of head shaking and wide eyes and smiles, like, yeah, more. So, good time.
Yeah, you can hear that. Yeah, no, it's awesome when a producer comes in and just gets what the band is about. And you don't have to issue too many instructions, because they're the albums that I feel don't work. There's too many examples to mention there, especially some of the latter day Metallica stuff or what have you, where I mean, you're competing. That's another point. You're competing against, when I say, and I feel this way because I'm of the vintage, but Jamie Jaster, you've probably spoken to him before, talks about high tide raises all ships. I don't think it does. I think Metallica, there's only so much oxygen in the room for rock and metal. When Metallica have a release, they tend to take up a lot of it. So in terms of the promotions, that sort of thing, you guys are a band that sell yourselves, so it's not necessarily about that. But how do you feel about social media and the way in which you can get your music across to, and here's the key point, young and impressionable listeners? Have you got a strategy around that?
Well, I don't know if we necessarily have a strategy around it, but, our record label does. I think that the key to any type of longevity in this business through the changes, and obviously you're looking at somebody who's I came in at the age of excess. I called it, the end of the cocaine years. It's not like I ever had a record, executive dump cocaine in front of me. I just say it because that's what people think it is.
Yeah.
It never happened. But the point is, it was vinyl and it was cassettes, and then it turned digital with the CDs, and it became, it's eventually streaming. If you don't reinvent yourself to some capacity, or at least surround yourself with the right people who understand that from a position of youth, I think you're lost. I mean, it's easy to be a dinosaur in this. All you got to do is sit there and complain, and then you go back and you look and you say, this fucking guy doesn't have any social media. That's probably the big problem. Or he's running the social media. Like, it would be the worst thing if I'm running the social media, because I really don't give a flying fuck what people think about me. I don't have a fucking Facebook. I don't want a Facebook. I don't want a personal thing. I used to get from my aunt, can't say hi to your cousin on the Facebook. I'm like, I said, why doesn't my cousin give me a call?
Yeah.
Why's my cousin give me a call?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm
just a second. My dog barking outside. You hear it yapping? Yeah, just
go for it.
Girlfriend's with her. She was chasing skunks and cats before. I've always raised German Shepherds here. We live in like the northwest of New Jersey. It's all mountains and lakes. It's a really great area for animals.
Yeah.
But man, the dogs are like.
Yeah, I know. We live in the cane fields here on the north side of the Gold Coast, and I've got a bull terrier. So whenever there's cane toads and possums for us, and there's the occasional lorikeet or something like that he'll scream bark his bloody head off at. But yeah, similar vibe, very different reasons. Hey, you might remember I I tend to go fairly broad with my conversations, and I start bringing in some social issues and the like. And I always love talking to the icons, which I've got to say, you're definitely one of them. The icons of the extreme metal and the heavy metal genre. So lyrical themes and the like. We've talked about this in the past, as I mentioned, but this time around, since we caught up in 2017, there's just been so much happen. Okay, so we last week, I think it was, or this week, there was another bloody school shooting, but this time the dominant narrative of the moment from big tech, social media, and mainstream media is all of the trans things. So that's got bought into that. So, of course, you're starting to see some narratives around that, but that's just the tip of the iceberg, okay? Because I feel like we've gone from COVID hysteria, Me Too, Trump derangement syndrome, Black Lives Matter riots, Antifa takeovers of great cities in the United States like Seattle and Portland, the Capitol Hill event, the Ukraine war, the Chinese warmongering, espionage on a global scale. Need I go on? Of course not. You know what I'm talking about. But there's all of these things that are ripe for you to pick at from a lyrical perspective. So did you dive into any of these topics?
I don't. I dove into a little of the lockdown kind of stuff because, I think I was living it at the time that it became personal. I think that one of the more important things for me to do when I'm writing lyrics is to distance myself from the news. Just for peace of mind and probably better mental and physical health. You can throw up half the time. This whole Nashville thing the other day. It was just gut wrenching to see that kind of stuff and how it's. The event itself is bad enough, but to twist a narrative around it as if somebody's being a spin doctor to say that this is more important than the actual event itself makes it that much worse. And I think
you got it. Yeah.
Whether it be Trump derangement syndrome, I think there's an absolute media derangement syndrome here, that everything is a pecking order. Everything has been politicized. And if you look at the country and this country in particular, when I get my news, I go, actually, believe it or not, I go to Sky News in Australia, because I think it's a little bit more balanced. It's
great source of news.
From the outside. Yeah. They're looking for more, from the outside. And but I think that the country is not split down the middle 50-50. Everybody seems to believe that we are a 50-50 split. It's not. It's the fucking extreme right and the extreme left that seems to hold all the fucking power. Whereas 80% of the Americans, regardless of what their political party may be, are common sense, good thinking fucking people. Not fucking podunk hillbillies and not all fucking elitist Democrats, for instance. It's just good fucking people there in the center. But it's being run by that 20%, 10% on each end. And that's who is presenting the narratives in these situations. And I think it's absolutely a shame. I really look forward to the fact that, the coming 2024 elections, we keep hoping every election is going to be a better one. I just hope that this is the one where people say, enough of this fucking horse shit. You were getting rich off of our fucking sweat and making us feel guilty. And I think it's just a bunch of crap. But I didn't go very deeply into social issues except for the pandemic. Obviously, the surgeon a little bit, but it was more of a pushback. It was more of, had enough of this. Let's let the blood and get rid of the infection. Fever actually has dates in it that, when the tour was canceled in 2020, in the center section, I think the line is 3/12/20. We're all shot down. That kind of that kind of an approach to things. So it's a little bit historical there, but I didn't go into all the other stuff that happens socially and politically in the States.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because Andrew Bogut, the NBA player, an Aussie bloke who's now over here, he very much points out a lot of these things that go on and brings it to mainstream people's attention who may not be paying attention to the news and the like. And I think from that perspective, does sport and music, does it play a role to take you away from all of this bullshit that we've got in the day-to-day? Or is it also a vehicle? Because they're both correct. Now they're both correct perspectives in terms of they both work. We've seen that. Or does sport, particularly music, I should say, does that play more of a role in that it can highlight some of the bullshit that's going on out there and then direct people toward more credible news sources, like you're saying with Sky News and the like? Because there's this, you bang on point, Blitz. I mean, there's this issue where 80 to 90% of the population are just numb to what the hell's going on, whilst the 10% on the fringes of either side, let's face it, it'd be 1% on the far right, 9% on the far left, because the far left have got big tech, social media, mainstream media.
Yes.
They control this narrative. So this thing about the school shooting has gone from being about, of course, the gun issue is always going to be an issue in the United States. It's always going to be a hot topic, if you like. But now it's become a trans issue. And you've got to be careful about how you're referring to this person who fucking killed kids, whether they are they, them, a Ziza, or a fucking, how about they're just a piece of shit? How about we just go with that narrative as opposed to be worrying about whether or not we're figuring out their fucking pronouns or not?
Well, I think, I can only guess this. I mean, I'm not in that community, but I would think that, when this came out, where the information came out after the shooting, it was the one thing after another. And one of the talking points was, a mental health issue for the shooter. Now the point is that this person is trans and has a mental health issue. And I think somewhere in there, that fringe element wants to say, oh, no. This person doesn't have a mental health issue because she's trans. You all got to know that. And now we're fearing for our lives. So you've taken what becomes the real issue and jumped in front of the fact and jumped in front of the tragedy with your own narrative about mental health / trans. So it devalues the lives of those lost in that situation, because something else has become more important than that. And I think if we start losing sight of that, and I mean, obviously we're the school shooting capital of the entire fucking world. I mean, that's just the way it works here, I guess. I mean, I'm not saying it's good. I mean, obviously I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that because of our gun laws and because of mental health issues, we, lead the world in that type of in that crime or that horrific event. But I don't think it should be politicized or socialized to that of, now we're all fearing for our lives because we're trans, and you said that we have mental health issues. It's about fucking Nashville. Done.
Yeah. They find a way to insert identity politics and critical race theory into almost everything. Broad brushstroke here. I know that it's a broad brushstroke to call it this cultural Marxism, but that's where they're coming from, and it's just sick. And now you've got issues in the state of Victoria here in Australia where they're drafting legislation for fucking pre-teens to become trans without the consent of their parents. And this, I think, it's going on in California too. By the way, I could be wrong, but I think I saw a lot of our
there's
politics.
some states that are doing that. Blue states here that have protection rights for kids that without telling the parents, et cetera. So
it's sick. It's sick, and I don't know where the hell we're going to with this stuff here. It's the Sodom and Gomorrah Mark II, and at some point in time, mate, I hope the ship rights. So look, I'll move on back to the music. Thanks for sharing your views on those topics too, by the way. I think it's important to do that because you are looked up to out there and people, and I know a lot of my listeners they're not dumb. I can tell you that, mate.
This is a personal standpoint on this. I mean, and you should know that. I mean, I never think that I should be in a position that I should be leading people with my, feeling about things. All I stated was common sense through this entire part of this, and I really get irritated by dudes. They can, a guy can write a record and it's like it got a little bit hot and people appreciate it. And the second record, they become better songwriters. But a third record, they're fucking superstars. They're the same douchebag who wrote the first fucking record. You know what I mean? It's not like they didn't get all of a sudden smarter. They got richer, which makes people want to listen to what they have to say. But it doesn't mean they're any smarter than the beginning. And I kind of, maybe I have some experience and I've been around the world a bunch of times. But I think people need to make up their own minds. I think that's where you find, recognize your own soul as opposed to the soul of myself or others in the music industry.
Yeah, your opinion's valid, though. You talk about having a bit more snow on the roof, so to speak. But you came through the education system at a time where it was an education system. It wasn't an indoctrination system. And you had to pass exams, and there was a winner and a loser out in the sporting field. All this, the same. I was probably the last generation that did that, being part of Gen X. But it's important that we see world that it's a binary equation a lot of the time. There are winners and losers, and there are opinions that lead to bad outcomes, and there are opinions that lead to better and more positive outcomes, depending on the context and the circumstance. And
great point. Now we could go on all fucking night over a six-pack on this, and it would be, I think we would tend to agree with each other.
I have no doubt we would. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. What about? I'm going to go completely left turn here. Okay, I like all of your albums. I like the stylistic change after Bobby left, and you started writing more groove-oriented stuff too. And I think a lot of people appreciate about the band that you found a way to get by. But do you have a least favourite era, epoch, or even Overkill album?
No, era. I can't say an era. I think probably my least favorite Overkill record is the Relics record, but it's primarily based on production. I think that we got caught in something that was a little weird at that time, and we just couldn't bail ourselves out of it. I think we had some shitty fucking guitar tones on that record. I didn't think the songwriting was all that bad, but the record's kind of a lost soul to me. I used to not like I Hear Black so much, but as time passed, I thought to myself, wow, that actually is just a record that's just a few months shy of development for me. But still, there's some fucking heavy shit on that record. The era probably I'm the most proud of is believe it or not, is the 90s, because this shit was harder to do back in the 90s, and that should be noted. This wasn't like the flavor of the day. This wasn't like, look at me kind of a thing. You had to carve your niche. You had to make shit happen. And we were still touring and still releasing and still finding labels, I mean, 5 years before that, there was 100 thrash bands somewhere around our level, or maybe 50 or something, somewhere around, and then all of a sudden there's 10, So the point is that the field opened up, but I think that, it gave us the opportunity to go back to the underground and do what we do best, release some, in my opinion, some great records. I mean, The Underground and Below, Colin's first record with us, to me, is still one of my favorite records. And that's because it wasn't the easiest thing to do at the time. So it's that era to me is, something that I think is, that's, kind of the Measure of the Men era.
Horoscope is probably without question, I think, is probably one of the greatest thrash albums ever recorded. But do you feel like as though that's your signature album?
Well, I think it's probably the start of the second chapter. The original chapter being the first four records with Bobby Gustafson in there, Rat Skates for a couple. Sid Falk was a great drummer. He came into, even into that Horoscope era, and played great on that. He had become really a quintessential thrash drummer at that point. I mean, to me, there was only a couple. There was, the Lombardo, Charlie Benante, and I think, I would pick Sid
Gene,
right there.
Gene Hoglan as well, yeah. Yeah, all great, yeah.
Yeah, Gene, right. Gene. Oh, right, the Dark Angel stuff. We took them out there in that era. But Sid was up there. I mean, whatever, top 5, top 10. I mean, he was just, he became a monster and made that record happen. But that's the beginning of the second era, I think.
Yeah. What about tours and the like? Are there any places that you wouldn't tour again? In other words, it's just not financially viable, or it's proven to be just too hard to graft?
Well, I mean, I like going everywhere. I mean, that's not a problem. But I mean, there's some places where they do festivals where you just can't believe that how far you got to go in a van. I remember doing a festival in Bulgaria once where there was no airport anywhere near the city where this festival was. And it was us in Exodus. And it was like we flew into Bucharest, Romania, and then we had to drive 9 hours in a fucking van.
Oh, my God, yeah.
So it's like, It's like 12 guys in a fucking van, all crunched in with our stuff for a 9-hour fucking ride. And I got out of the van, I stretched myself, I said, that's it, never again. I will never come here again. This is the way I have to come here. And I didn't even do a show. I mean, I was just standing in front of the hotel at that point. So.
Oh, yeah. Is Eastern Europe still a bit challenging to tour?
Occasionally, based on travel, based on the roads. It depends where. If you're smashing in and out of the bigger cities, if you're in Vilnius, Lithuania, that's not hard. If you're in Tallinn, Estonia, Czech Republic's fucking awesome. Poland is great. I love playing Budapest. Budapest is one of my favorite cities. It's just, I don't know, it's just kind of affordable fun all over the place. It's kind of like, to me, it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe, I mean, redneck's not the right word, but it's like the redneck Paris,
I've got to go. You convinced me. Well, there you have it. The legendary Blitz from Overkill. I reckon guys of Blitz's vintage, the guys that have been around for decades, they're my favourite interview subjects, I've got to say. I love doing the Cradle of Filth stuff, and I love talking to guys like Blitz from Overkill because they're intelligent and no topic seems to be off limits. Yes, we love the music, but we're not just about the music, are we? We've still got to lead our lives. So yeah, it's always really cool to dive into other topics to do with the world of current affairs, social events, and politics. Okay. Now, if you like that chat, there are many more just like it over at scarsandguitars.com. Whilst you're there, click on the link in the banner and you'll be taken to a gateway to where you can download a sample of my book, Scars and Guitars, Volume 1, Conversations from the World of Heavy Metal and Beyond. And if you do complete the purchase because you like the sample, hit me up because I want to thank you personally. On that note, there's some more information to share with you about the book, but before we get to that, I need to bid you a fond farewell. My name is Andrew Mackay-Smith and I'm the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast series. Until next time, it is a very goodbye for now.
This is Eric Rattan of Cannibal Corpse. You are listening to the Scars and Guitars podcast with Andrew Mackay-Smith.
I've been the host of the Scars and Guitars podcast since 2017. The first musician I interviewed for the show was David Vincent from Morbid Angel, and things have just snowballed from there. In all, I've posted almost 650 podcast episodes featuring conversations with many of the leading lights of rock, heavy metal, and beyond. It just got to a point where I thought, I need to write a book about all this, so that's exactly what I did. In Scars and Guitars Volume 1, you'll read a heap of deep reveals and commentary, such as Des Fafara talking about Coal Chamber and why the band will never return.
If you're a band just starting out, you need to hear me. Do not start a band with partners. Ever.
Yeah, wise words there. Sage advice, mate, for anybody.
Don't ever, because I can't go do Coal Chamber right now unless I get others involved.
Phil Anselmo talks about the episode in his career which gives him the greatest sense of accomplishment.
I think the staying power of the fans and the staying power of the songs, whether it's Pantera, Down, or Superjoint, the fans remember the songs.
Alex Skolnick from Testament confirms that, yes, playing the guitar in Ozzy's band is anything but an ordinary gig. Will Silent Oz from Dimmu Borgir write a book? Pa from Sabaton gives advice to people who want to start a band.
Look at the team around you, look at the bandmates. If the guys want to be on the stage, then it's all cool. If the guys want to be backstage, then it's not going to be cool.
Current and former members of Cradle of Filth discuss the band's seminal 90s material. Read about the reaction to George Lynch and Mark from Suicide Silence's comments when they throw shade at then President Donald Trump.
We have this idiotic monster, this egotistical, self-aggrandizing, complete piece of shit in there. I just can't understand how we've gotten to this place.
And yeah, we kicked a hornet's nest with Sepultura. Percussive overlord Gene Hoglan talks about recording with Chuck Schuldiner.
Chuck was always, he was very, very open-minded, and he was into having his musicians that were playing with him just reach out for the best stuff that they had.
Phil Campbell from Motorhead discusses what it takes to get sober. John Five answers his critics who dismiss his tenure with Marilyn Manson.
You know, my name is John Five, and Manson gave me that name, and I had some of the best years of my life in that band and learned a lot.
And we get the lowdown on Treyarch Zagtoth from those who would know, including his mother. All across Scars and Guitars Volume 1, there are moments of tension, relief, tragedy, exhilaration, and throughout it all, you'll obtain insight that I believe no one else has managed to obtain from many of your favourite artists. So treat yourself. Scars and Guitars Volume 1 is currently available as an ebook with a print edition on the horizon. Follow the links attached and download a sample. I'm sure you'll be compelled to read the whole book.